Greetings, brothers and sisters. I have a bunch of stuff to get to with JoJo Magoo, President JoJo Magoo. His gaffes have reached a new level, and the cover up for his gaffes have also reached a new level. And the mainstream media and comedians, particularly, are avoiding just so much material, like content out the. I mean, it's crazy. I made a video the other day. It's on apocalaughsnow channel about his. This was a stunning gaffe, and then I have a whole bunch of I have a whole press conference. I want to cover two of them and go through some of that when I never got to a couple days ago. But he's just out there drooling on himself. I mean, he's just, he's supposed to be the president, and the media's refusal to acknowledge what they're seeing. Like the ultimate emperor is senile. The emperor has no clothes. The emperor is, is just gone mentally. And there's like the, political aspect and what kind of character a person has. But now we're talking about something where the person's incapable of doing the job. So I got a few other things to get to. You can see this gaff that he had from the other day.
Pleading that God, let there be a miracle. Let there be something happen for me that's good. Because I have, like many of you do, some idea what it's like to suffer that kind of loss. So many of them are suffering. They had
That's my dog Buddy barking in the background.
basic heart-wrenching questions. Will I be able to recover the body of my son or daughter, my husband, my cousin, my mom and dad? How can I have closure without being able to bury them? If I don't get the body, what do I do? Jill and I wanted them to know.
So he went on he talked about this for 3 or 4 minutes. I'm just, jumping in here. And he was talking about meeting with the families of the people who were involved with the building thing in Miami, right? So it's something tragic, something where, he's talking about people who are grieving and their loss of life. And then he segues into finding a silver lining in all this.
That we're with them and the country's with them. Our message today is that we're here for you as one nation, as one nation. And that's the message we communicated. We'll be in touch with a lot of these families continuing through this process. But there is much more to be done. We're ready to do it. And again, I thank the governor. I thank my colleagues, Senator Scott, Senator Rubio.
He had a moment where he got confused there, but that's not the big gaffe.
I thank Debbie Wasserman Schultz for their total, complete cooperation. There's no disagreement, no bickering. Everybody's on the same team. It's what America's all about. It's about pulling together, leaving nobody behind. And that's what made me feel, the one thing that made me feel good about this.
The one thing that made me feel good about this, he's talking about this building collapsing. He's just talking to the families. And he has been a politician forever. And any politician knows, regardless of what you feel about a circumstance, and, for me, when I'm covering this stuff, it's hard for me to take anything that's happening in the media, anything happening with celebrities and, all the drama and things that I call the show. It's hard for me to take it seriously, even if it's some tragedy that's happened, because it's something you're watching on TV. It's something that's not real. It's something happening. I mean, at least in terms of my experience of it. I don't know, what's being embellished or, they're always trying to manipulate you, the media and politicians, and they're trying to, win the narrative of each event that happens. And it's hard for me to take any of it seriously because it's just like something you're watching on TV. It's like another reality, just like stuff on the internet. It's hard for me to feel sympathy and empathy for things that are happening because I'm not, there's a detachment there. People have a detachment to the news. That's why you can watch the news and it can be, half an hour of just bad news, right? And so For me, it's not real. It's not like, your neighbor or your family member or people are suffering that you can empathize with and identify with. But in terms of what you're supposed to do as a politician, again, you need to make decisions, so you have to you have to distance yourself from the emotions. But when you present whatever you're supposed to present, like what he's doing here in this press conference, JoJo Magoo is supposed to be 100% somber, right? This is a horrible thing, and just nothing positive. Not saying the one good thing is right. You can't say that, and he should know that. Like as a politician who's done this forever, of course he's always been a guy who made gaffes. But you can't say, "Oh wow, there's a silver lining to this building collapse." We're all showing we can get along, right? It's a bipartisan statement that the Republicans and Democrats are getting along to come together like America should be. And that makes JoJo feel warm and fuzzy inside. Like it's not something you could say. But the fact that the media, like if this was Trump, they would be slamming this comment because it is a gaffe. It's a behavior, it's a mistake, it's a slip up of epic proportion because you can't say that, right? And so we'll come back to JoJo, but this is, there's stuff to do with the media aspect of this thing. So the one mainstream comedian that's covering this is Kyle Dunnigan. Like you have, these various types of. I mean, I don't know if you'd consider Kyle Dunnigan, I'm not sure how you say it, a mainstream comedian, but he's written. He was on the writing staff for like Amy Schumer and other, comedians. I mean, he's somebody who's, connected at least to some degree with Hollywood and these types of people. And he had this savage show. Take one of my viewers that heard about Kyle Dunnigan through my other video. I covered this, but that viewer left a comment and said this is on there. This isn't for kids. It's pretty brutal, but it's a savage takedown of Bill Maher, Ben Shapiro, AOC, Hunter Biden. He does a whole thing on Hunter Biden here. It's kind of funny, and then he, of course, JoJo Magoo that he portrays in a way that's just really bad. But he addresses this in the beginning of the show.
And finally, new rule. Comedians can't make fun of Joe Biden. Because it's impossible. Because he's been great. I know a bunch of fat people are disappointed. Because...
So he's saying that you can't make fun of Joe Biden. This is his impression of Bill Maher.
Trying to make fun of Joe Biden is like praying to God. A complete waste of time. Okay, that's our show. I want to thank my guests, Benjamin Netanyahu and Pete Davidson.
Who's this Joe Biden everyone keeps talking about?
So he does this thing like a sitcom, and I mean it's a brutal, savage takedown of Joe Biden. Like a lot of stuff that's there. He does some of the whispering things or whatever. But there's so much material there, and you can see like what I cover here and so many other people, and then what he's doing here in this, like it's a sitcom that is centered around Joe Biden being a complete, tool, that there's so much material here, comic material, and these comedians refuse to cover it. And it's just, and I don't know what this guy's political leanings are or whether he's, a partial truther or just, whatever it is. But it's almost like a comedic sin to leave Joe Biden alone, like to have a hands-off approach to Joe Biden. Especially since there's a long history of gaffes and all these other things. I mean, it's not like he's just doing this now because of his mental, deterioration. He's been gaffing it up for his entire career. He's been a walking gaff even when he was a young person. And that's what he was known for, especially as vice president, because he was more famous then. He was more in the spotlight. But he's been a tool forever. And he is, a punchline. He's a walking punchline. And the news media and these mainstream comedians aren't covering it. Democrats fear Kamala Harris can't beat any GOPer in 2024, including Trump, report says. And so I'm going to get back to Joe Biden. I have like those two things to cover. I'm going to do that at the end. But what they're saying here is that this is a New York Post, and I don't know, it's a right-wing leaning news organization. They should be thinking Kamala can't beat anybody because she couldn't beat anybody before she was vice president. As vice president, you take a lot of, you're the fall guy. She's supposed to be, the one that gets criticized. Like Joe Biden was a good vice president because, the vice president acts incompetent and is a wingman, right? Protects the president from criticism. And she's taken a fall for what's happening at the southern border because JoJo Magoo screwed her over by putting her on that thing. But also now it's coming out in more and more leaks. Her staff says she's abusive and a horrible person. And so with all that, like, she wasn't popular before, and she's going to have her own gaffes and her own missteps and things. And nobody liked her. Like, on paper, she was good for, like, as a demographic person, right? JoJo Magoo first said that he was going to have a woman vice president. Like, he promised everybody that's who he was going to nominate as his vice president because, that's who he was going to pick because he was being pressured and, whatever. And they wanted to run a woman, and as since Hillary and all those things, and they felt like Hillary got cheated, a lot of these hardcore Democrats. So he promised a woman, and then they said, well, it's got to be a woman of color. And he said, well, whatever. He wasn't going to commit to that, but then he was on the hook for that as well. And Kamala, who is somebody who's, part Jamaican, she's part East Indian. She's the first woman, she's the first Asian, East Indian Asian. And she's the first, woman of color, whatever you would say a woman from the Bahamas is, right? Someone who comes from, I guess, African descent as well. And so she was historic in her demographics. And they made a big deal about her being the first woman of these three sort of break the glass ceiling vice president. And so that's like who she is in terms of her ethnic makeup. But who she is in terms of her personality is somebody people don't like and don't connect to. Somebody who they just don't like. Democrats didn't like her. She polled at less than 1% and didn't get one vote in the primary and had to withdraw. She didn't even run, right? She was a quitter. She didn't even make it to the voting part, right? There's all these people and she was pushed out there. They really liked Kamala. And now they have somebody they don't like. They got a president who's deteriorating and isn't going to make it for 4 years in terms of, he's not going to be able to run again in 4 years. I mean, how bad will he be in 4 years? I mean, he's going to be like 82, I think. He's 78 now or 79. And so he's going to be 82 when he's running for president again. And he's just not up to the task. I mean, he's fallen apart. And so they're stuck with Kamala, who is the heir apparent, and she's not likable. And that's what the Democrats did to themselves. I mean, we'll see how this all plays out because JoJo should have won anyway. Like he was not a valid candidate, and he won. So we'll see how it all plays out in 4 years. Like he can't, but people aren't going to be identifying or happy about Kamala being elected because they just don't like her. The Olympics don't want black women to win. So this person's putting out this theory how it's keeping women of color, black women, from being in the Olympics. And we know about Shakira Richardson, and it's about other women as well, the article. But here is AOC saying, AOC says Olympic ban on marijuana is an instrument of racism following black track stars suspension. So I wanted to include this part in the video because it also ties into Joe Biden and, all of it. And it's about three things. The three things I'm pointing out here is life is not fair, but it is. I'll explain more about that in a moment. That's point number one. Number two, there is a rebellion against rules in selectively. And the third thing is that if you end up calling everything racist, when something doesn't go your way and you're a person of color or whatever you are, or even people on the right wing who claim that they're being, in terms of white people are now being attacked left and right, and, they feel under attack in their way of life, all these things. Every demographic feels like they're being attacked one way or another. And I've said this with the truther stuff as well, that there is discrimination, there is, a movement against all kinds of different groups, right? There's a, division. We're living in a time of the politics of division, and real things are happening. But if every time something happens and you immediately say, well, they must be censoring me, like this is for people who are listening to this, truthers. Well, are they? Like, sometimes they are, but sometimes they're not, right? And if you say everything that happens to you, well, it's because of racism, well, sometimes it is and sometimes it's not, right? And in this case, it's not. Because the World Olympic Committee, whatever it's called, has made it that smoking pot is banned. The World Anti-Doping Agency. And you can say, well, that's a racist policy because it targets, I don't know, black people because they're more likely to smoke pot. But we know Michael Phelps smoked pot. We know all these other various athletes smoke pot, right? And so, and there's white people, lots of white people smoke pot. I don't know what the demographic breakdown is, but we know that this is something that's not exclusive to one group. Whether the rule is, should be there or not, like, you can drink alcohol, but you can't smoke pot. Pot doesn't enhance your performance. And so the rule could go, like the rule, in many ways doesn't necessarily make sense, but it's the rule. And this is my, talking about discipline. So we're going to go through Sha'Carri Richardson's interview in a moment and get more into what this article says. But it is, something that is a rule and you have to just obey it. It's not, if you want to participate, then it's the rule. But there is such a, the lines are getting blurred on rules and discipline so much, and authority, which none of which, I'm somebody who has a problem with all those things. I mean, in terms of my personal orientation to life, right? I had to learn to be disciplined. Like when I became a disciplinarian, I had been an uncle, right? I never was in a role of a disciplinarian. I have one brother and three sisters. My brother had 3 kids. My sisters had 2 kids each. So they had, I had 9 nephews and nieces. And, I never had to be in the role of a disciplinarian, right? Like I could be an uncle, and an uncle just, hangs out with your nieces and nephews. But when you're a disciplinarian, it's something different. And then I started working treatment centers where these kids were poorly behaved. And I wasn't a very disciplined person myself. I always had, problems with the rigidity of rules. And, a lot of the things that people are complaining about are things that I myself experienced having issues with, right? Rules. And I smoked pot and did drugs in college, in my teen years and my early 20s. And so I can understand why young people do those things, right? I can understand why, from my own experience, or why people self-medicate and breaking rules, and, people make mistakes or whatever it is. But you pay for those mistakes because the rules are there. You know what the rules are. You want to go to the Olympics, you don't smoke pot because they drug test you. Whatever her excuse is, and in this case, her mom died, and I'll get into that because she talks about it in the interview. But that's, doesn't matter. The rules are still the rules, whether her mom died or not. I said the same thing for Trump supporters, that regardless of whatever might have happened during the electoral process, whatever cheating might have gone on, whatever, unfairness you think there is, Joe Biden is now your president, because that's all part of a contest, right? If there's cheating, if there's, whatever dirty tricks happen, especially in politics, whatever things that are, dishonesty, the lies, the manipulation, all the ugliness of politics or sports, when you have a contest, all that stuff is a part of it. And there's a definitive winner and loser. And Trump's the loser in this, regardless of whether you think he actually lost or whether Joe Biden got all the votes, that he claimed that they say he got or whatever. Joe Biden is your president, right? That's, it's a fact. Joe Biden is your president. If something happened to reverse that, then, Donald Trump would be the president. It's not. But the president is whoever the president is, right? Whoever the beast says the president is. I said the same thing when the Hillary supporters were whining about Russia and Trump, somehow not my president. No, it is your president. You could say in your heart it isn't your president, but that doesn't mean your heart is in America, right? Like you can, you're an American and this is your president, JoJo Magoo. It's the same thing for all of these, whatever happens. And this is one of the wonderful teachings of the heartfulness system, that, of course, bringing in the idea of past lives and samskaras to this thing. But when things happen, no matter how unfair they seem, no matter how unjust they seem or wrong they seem, they're there for you to experience, because things going in a miserable way, an unfair way, a corrupt way, a way that you can't accept is part of life. Like that's an experience. Like in the heartfulness system, once you enter on the spiritual path, once you're on a spiritual journey and you are committed to reaching a spiritual goal, even if it's not a full commitment, you're now in, especially with the transmission and the cleaning aspect of the heartfulness system, you're now in a completely different, track than other people who are living in a very materialistic orientation towards their existence. And so this track that you get on when you become a practitioner of the heartfulness system, and when you first start and you're not really convinced, it's just the initial stages. But as you make that choice, all right, I'm going to see this thing through, I'm going to, be on my spiritual journey, then everything that happens to you in life is what you're supposed to undergo to reach your spiritual goal. Whatever material things that happen that are sucky, because they're gonna, like sucky things and unfair things that you're gonna feel are unfair are gonna happen to you. They just are. And you have to accept them as being from God. Not that human beings don't suck, not that human beings don't make mistakes, because they do. And that, affects all of it. But it's all part of a plan and a system where there are real consequences for making the wrong decision. In the heartfulness system, it is very, clear that you have one right decision to make in every circumstance. You have to make that decision over and over again. And there is an infinite amount of wrong possibilities. And we have the freedom to make those choices, to make those wrong choices. The right choice is always to do what your soul and God want you to do, like whatever that is in any given moment. In any choice point in your life, you can make the right choice, which furthers your advancement on the spiritual journey. And oftentimes that choice isn't a decision about going this way or that way. It's a decision to embrace the divinity that's within you, the part of you that's God, and to be grateful for whatever happens to you. Like that's an internal choice. When something befalls you, that you are grateful and you realize that even if it's something that's sucky, miseries as divine blessings is one of the maxims of the system, that you accept it as being something that is furthering your journey, that God is giving you exactly what you need, mirroring back to you exactly what you need to move forward on your spiritual journey. And that there are reasons for everything. And when you make a wrong decision, then that is especially if you're on a spiritual journey, the consequences and the checks and balances that help you get back on your right path, right, happen almost immediately, especially when you're on a spiritual journey. And so there's a system in place to make everything go the way it's supposed to go. It help you, encourage you to make the right decision. You understand this? That you get immediate feedback from, nature, the universe, or whatever you want to call it, to nudge you back on the right path, right? In the heartfulness system, they don't tell you what that, what the right decisions are. Like, you don't go to the master's system. What should I do here? What should I do here? Like, he'll say, all right, I'll pray for you. I'll pray that you can see it for yourself, because you have to learn to make those right decisions. So I just want to give that sort of to clarify for the way I view something like this, that there are rules. There are rules, whether the rules are fair or not, or necessary, or whatever it is. If you break those rules, there's consequences. Like, that's in human life, but also in spiritual life. And you just have to, you accept those consequences and move on. Taking responsibility for your choice. So she was on the Today Show. This is her winning. She was on the Today Show with these dour, somber news people here.
Remarkable journey that's drawn her comparisons to the legendary FloJo, and what could be a stunning disappointment for an athlete who's won the hearts of millions.
And you'll see from this news piece, it's like a tragedy, right? That this is some tragic thing that happened, some wrong thing, some sort of unjust thing that happened, because she can't compete in the Olympics because she tested positive for pot.
With a blazing time and standout style, Sha'Carri Richardson recently punched her ticket to Tokyo.
Richardson's going to Tokyo!
Unbelievable. The fact that I am an Olympian, no matter what is said or anything, I am an Olympian.
At the Olympic trials,
So, she set some sort of record. I saw this race. And then
21-year-old Dallas native won the 100-meter dash in a blazing 10.86 seconds, making her the fastest woman in America. But now it appears her Olympic dreams may have been put on hold. A U.S. Olympic source telling NBC News she failed a drug test after her finals win, testing positive for THC, the chemical found in marijuana.
International sports is very rigid. It's sports in general, but certainly international sports and Olympics is very rigid about all kinds of various drugs, even over-the-counter things you might find in like a cream or like a cough syrup or something. And so this happens all the time. And so you saw this with like Roger Clemens and Mark McGuire and Sammy Sosa and Barry Bonds when the steroids, remember how steroids was very rampant for a while in the American sports. And it took a while before they started to ban all these things in football, and it's a little bit more lax in American, like professional American sports, but internationally it's very strict. And so when you're going to compete internationally, you really can't do anything, right? You have to have you have to be aware of everything you put in your body, because this is something that's constantly happening to athletes, and it's not based in race. It's not skewed in one way or another. Some of the rules seem unfair, and like in terms of like marijuana, THC isn't going to boost your performance, and then things like CBD oil, that was something that was was not being able to be used in the NFL because of marijuana policies and rules. And so again, this is a rule and she broke it. It's not like it's just a cut and dry thing.
According to her lawyers, Sha'Carri has been suspended from the Olympic team, and her failed test may cause her to lose her spot on Team USA entirely. Her Olympic trial results were automatically disqualified when she tested positive. That means she won't be allowed to compete in her signature event, the 100 meters.
Again, just the tone. It's making it sound like it's unfair and it's tragic, right? This is MSNBC, and NBC is the media network that covers the Olympics. So they've been trying to build this person up as a star. They had some investment in her making it, and becoming a gold medalist, all these things, creating a backstory and marketing her, and all that's blown up. Like she's got endorsement deals and things like this, and now because she chose to smoke pot,
Sha'Carri captured the hearts of millions when she ran into the stands after her victory and hugged her grandmother just a week after losing her biological mother.
It has kept me grounded. This year has been crazy for me. Going from just last week losing my biological mother, and I'm still here.
Despite losing her mom, she still is in good spirits after winning the race and was celebrating, right? Which is fine, but she is laying the blame of smoking pot, which I guess this narrative is being pushed by the media, on the grief that she was suffering from her mom's death.
And after being notified of her failed drug test, Richardson tweeted yesterday, "I am human." Savannah.
Chanel, thank you. And Sha'Carri Richardson joins us now. Good morning, Sha'Carri. I just want to ask a simple question first. How are you doing?
I'm blessed to be alive. That's about it.
This is not easy. This is a hard moment that you're in right now. And
Savannah Guthrie. But they're just the tone of it, right? The style of it. Like, she smoked pot, which is against the rules. And again, maybe it's a rule that should go, at least could be considered. It isn't like taking steroids or something that's going to enhance your performance. But that doesn't matter. You want to compete in the Olympics, there are rules. I'm getting back to the discipline aspect of this. And when you break the rules, there are consequences. In this case, she doesn't get to compete. It's not, it sucks, but she made that choice, right? She knows, like every Olympic athlete knows, they're brutal on this stuff. And it's not, they test you. Like, they're going to test you right after the race. If you smoke pot before the race or after the race or whatever it is, and it stays in your system for like 30 days or whatever, and so you're going to miss out, right?
I thank you for being on. And I know you wanted to tell your story. So tell me, what happened? What led up to this positive test?
Just honestly, I want to take responsibility for my actions. I know what I did. I know what I'm supposed to do. No, I'm allowed not to do, and I still made that decision. But not making an excuse or looking for any empathy in my case, but just, however, being in that position of my life, finding out something like that, something that I would say is probably one of the biggest things that have impacted me positively and negatively in my life when it comes to dealing with the relationship I have with my mother. So that definitely was a very heavy topic on me, and people don't understand what it's like to have to, or people do. We all have.
So what she's saying here is because she found out her mother had died, she needed to smoke some pot to deal with the, that and the stress of the Olympics. So she's saying that's why she did it. That's the story that's being pushed out there. So going back to this article, the Olympics don't want black women to win. Sha'Carri Richardson and others have been disqualified in the 2021 Olympics because of policies that are racist and unjust. So this is what this person's saying, that these policies are racist and unjust. Richardson apologized on Friday on the Today Show, and in the interview during the U.S. Olympic trials in Oregon, a state where recreational weed is legal, a reporter informed her that her biological mother had died. She said she heard the news come from a complete stranger was triggering. That, in addition to the pressure to perform, led her to ingest weed.
Our different struggles, we all have our different things we deal with. But to put on a face, to have to go in front of the world and put on a face and hide my pain, who are you, or who am I to tell you how to cope when you're dealing with a pain or you're dealing with a struggle that you've never experienced before or that you've never thought you would have to deal with. Like, who am I to tell you how to cope? Who am I to tell you?
And so this isn't about whether you wanted or needed to smoke weed. It's whether or not you wanted to compete in the Olympics, right? I mean, this is what it comes down to. Like when you're in a situation where there are rules and the rules are there, like there are, discipline is something that's falling apart, where the mainstream media keeps on pushing excuses for some people, right? Like they won't say the same thing for people who are upset about Trump losing and their actions on January 6th, right? They're not going to give people a break who were upset and felt like Trump was cheated and what they did on January 6th, for example. It's a one-sided view of things where people are, well, look at you, her mom just died, she should get to smoke weed. And the Olympics should, forgive her and allow her to go and, not forgive her, but to allow her to compete anyway because she had a personal tragedy, so she gets to smoke pot, right? And many people are saying this. And I don't care if she smokes pot or not, and, she doesn't have to explain it to me. Like, all right, you made a choice to smoke pot. Like, it doesn't matter what went into it because she was saying she had to do something to cope with her mom's death. And, I could understand that. But you didn't have to smoke pot. You didn't have to self-medicate. Like, that's just going to take you away from feeling the pain. I mean, it's not going to, make things better. Taking pain medicine, even legal pain medicine. It's not going to make you feel better. It's just going to delay the grief. But then the person says in the article, sporting rules are almost never created with black women's unique experience or advancement in mind. And then it goes on to say this, it's unfair that a young black woman mourning her mother is penalized for using weed, a plant that is the basis of a multi-million-dollar industry that is legal for recreational use in 18 states and for medical use in 36 states. So again, you're saying that she should get special treatment. She should have privileges based in her race, more understanding, and because of her circumstances. But that's not how any of this stuff works. It's not how rules work, especially when you're dealing with things on an international level. And there's a lot of corruption in the Olympics, a lot of corruption in sports in general, a lot of cheating. I mean, there's all kinds of negative things, but there are the rules, and the rules are you don't smoke pot, and she knew it. Like she said at the end of the interview, she'd be ready for the anti-doping agencies in the future. And again, it's like she just ripped up a winning lottery ticket, right? That's what's happened here. And she could say, well, she was so, grief-stricken and all these things, and she made a momentary lapse in judgment. She's 21, and like I said, I smoked pot and, other things. I mean, cocaine and other things when I was in my 20s. So I'm not like, judgmental about any of that. But this idea that the rules should be bent, and, they'll be pushing to allow marijuana use in the future, and, I don't care. Like, whatever, right? They can, alcohol is maybe as bad or worse drug than pot. I mean, there's all these things. Of course, CBD oil is something beneficial. I don't know. Like, I don't care. The Olympics are very strict about all these things because so many people are cheating and getting an unfair advantage. And also they have a strict set of like behavioral guidelines. They don't want the athletes to appear as being like druggies and things like this. And, it's like an international committee. She made the mistake, right? For whatever reason, she made the mistake, and they're making it sound like it is based in race because that is something that's said pretty much all the time. But what's going to happen is when you make the claim that things that are racist or based in race isn't, then it creates a backlash after a while because there's people who say, well, you're just using that claim as an advantage, right? To get some sort of advantage or whatever it is. And that's what's happening now, and it's causing more division and less people being, open to other points of view. And so with that, we have JoJo Magoo. Here's a guy who was placed, and he can go back to Kamala too, who was placed in a position that he didn't win by the merit of his campaign and his abilities. The way that they game, this is just politics in general, but in terms of the primaries, he displayed the lack of, he didn't have the ability to coherently articulate his positions. He was wandering off on stage. He was confused. He was lost. And before that, he had a lot of negatives. He wasn't like the world's best guy and politician. He was a known entity. He was a joke. He was a gaff magnet. He was a guy who snoozled and groped and sniffed women and children's hair, a weird guy. He's abrasive, short fuse, a bad temper. And throughout his campaign to win the nomination, he displayed a total lack of ability to be up to the task. And I'm just talking about this being an acting role where you're the figurehead or the face of the nation, right? Where you're the president, it is in some ways an imaginary position. I'm not talking about all the power that allegedly goes along with being president, because a lot of that is ruled by committee, especially in his case. I'm just talking about JoJo going out there and confidently and coherently being able to deliver a message in a way that people could say, all right, at least this guy isn't, got dementia or something, because it appears that he does.
Issues that they have to be able to generate the kind of support they need nationwide to maintain the government.
Sir. Thought on Afghanistan.
I want to talk about happy things, man.
I want to talk about happy things, man. Let's play that again.
Have to be able to generate the kind of support they need nationwide to maintain the government.
Sir. Thought on Afghanistan.
I want to talk about happy things, man.
Come on, man. I want to talk about happy things, you Debbie Downer. They started asking about Afghanistan. He got 3 questions in. This was about jobs plan. I'm not sure why Afghanistan is in the news, but it must be for a reason. And so there was multiple questions about Afghanistan. He got through 2 of them, and then he says he wants to talk about happy things. And he's a career politician, and your job isn't, okay, well, tell us the subjects that we're allowed to ask you questions on. It's because they pampered him and gave him unfair treatment so he could become president. I mean, they didn't ask him, hardball questions. They didn't report on him. They didn't report on his gaffes. They didn't treat him fairly, like compared to the way they were treating Trump. And now you got this complete joke as president. And, it's all of his press conferences are loaded with these kind of answers and things that would make you scratch your head if you didn't realize how far gone JoJo was, a year ago. Like this is consistent behavior of a guy was never a star politician. He was never great at being a politician in terms of being able to connect with people. He's always been weird. He's always been corrupt. He's always been, a gaff magnet. But, now he's also got dementia.
Afghanistan. I'm not going to answer any more questions on Afghanistan. Look, it's 4th of July.
On the economy.
It's 4th of July. You deserve a holiday. What's all this Afghanistan stuff? He was a senator and then a vice president during the Afghanistan debacle. A lot of it had to do with reestablishing the opium trade in Afghanistan, which the Taliban had crushed. And then under Bush and then Obama, they were, facilitating the export of opium from Afghanistan, a place that, for whatever reason, it's easy to grow poppies and create a high-quality opium and, heroin, all these things. And this guy has been a part of that as a senator and then vice president. But it's the 4th of July, man. It was canceled last year. I couldn't go out of my basement. They wouldn't let me out. So I want to talk about happy things.
I'm concerned that you guys are asking me questions that I'll answer next week, but this is a holiday weekend. I'm going to celebrate it. There's great things happening.
I'm going to celebrate. I'll answer the tough questions next week. He hasn't really had any tough questions. And when he does, he loses it.
Economy's growing faster than any time in 40 years. We've got a record number of new jobs. COVID deaths are down 90%. Wages are up faster than any time in 15 years. We're bringing out our troops.
And there it is. He's channeling Trump. That's what Trump used to do. The media would criticize him, and he would list his accomplishments. Come on, man. And talk about all the negativity and stuff that, how negative the media was being. And then he'd list his accomplishments. That JoJo was literally copying Trump. And the media used to hammer Trump for it, but they won't for JoJo. This is great. He's channeling Trump.
Home. We have all across America. People are going to ball games and
people are going to ball games. You want to talk about Afghanistan?
Doing good things. This is a good. I'll answer all your negative questions. Not negative. Your legitimate questions.
They're legitimate questions. Not you're negative. I mean legitimate. You guys are fake news. How long before JoJo's calling him fake news? He's turning into Trump. So I covered this. A future made by America. I covered this where he whispered again, and this whole thing was hilarious. He's reading in the beginning, but he doesn't even do that well. And then you can see where he makes a segue, where he's just talking off the cuff. America Jobs Plan, La Crosse, Wisconsin, and this is your president.
American auto worker and the future of electric vehicles. China is going full bore. We're providing more electric vehicles than any nation in the world.
China's going full bore.
It used to be, when I first got to the United States Senate, actually in the 60s, when I was getting out of late 60s, getting out of law school.
He's a lawyer.
What happened? We invested more in R&D and investment in manufacturing than any nation in the world.
That's what happened.
Now we're number 8 in the world.
Are you saying America isn't number 1?
China used to be number 9. Now they're number 2 in the world.
Who's number 1?
And when you build a charging station, it spurs even more investment and more infrastructure around it.
You got to build some charging stations for these electric vehicles.
The local convenience store, the local hamburgers place.
You mean like McDonald's? Like, how old are you? The local soda fountain, the local burger place and hot dog joint. It's got to be up around the electrical charging power station.
Think about nobody's old enough, but my dad used to tell me because he worked.
Nobody's old enough as old as I am. I'm the only guy left from a time when my dad used to tell me stuff. But you guys, you're not old enough.
Back in the days for the American Oil Company, they came along with the combustion engine. You needed to be able to put gas in the engine. In the car.
You don't put it in the engine, you put it in the car, and it goes into the engine. It's like a gas tank type of thing.
The tank. Well, guess what? You had to build gas stations.
Are you sure about that? I want to see all the research on that. Maybe there could have been another way.
One of my dad's jobs, my grandpa Biden's jobs, was to go from city to city, convincing them it was okay to bury these great big tanks with gasoline in them. And entire communities grew up around it.
Under these big tanks of flammable gasoline. Okay, so let's skip ahead here.
Charging stations to power them. This bipartisan deal, by the way, you had half Republicans and half Democrats come along and present this deal and negotiate this deal with me.
Half of them were Democrats, half of them were Republicans. And all of them were assholes.
Every time we negotiate in good faith and come together and get something big done, we break a little more of the ice that too often keeps us frozen in place and prevents us from solving the real problems people are facing. Let me be clear. There's much more to do, and I'm going to continue to fight for more. I'm going to keep working with Congress to pass even more of my economic agenda so we can keep building an economy from the bottom up and the middle out.
See, the whole thing about this infrastructure deal, and America's infrastructure is breaking down. I talked about that years ago. People have known about it for years. But the problem is it's harder to fix existing cities than it was to build the cities themselves, right? If you're going to put in the sewers and all the things that are, underground, then it's great to do that first and then build the foundations in the basements, and then, you build from the ground up. But when you already have buildings on top of all that shit and roads and people driving on those roads, and the roads are already overpacked and the roads are there's not enough lanes for all the population growth in these cities, then it's really it's way more expensive to fix things, fix buildings, take them down. All these big buildings, they're environmental nightmares. These giant skyscrapers, they have no way to take them down safely. We always saw that some years ago. I made videos about that thing that happened. And they don't have any way, because all the toxicity in those buildings gets released throughout the city. There's no safe way to take down these big buildings, and it's really hard to repair them. And so that's why civilizations crumble, because it's 5 times more, especially with inflation, and he's destroyed the value of the dollar. So they're going to roll out this infrastructure money and bailout money. It's going to be whatever trillions of dollars post-COVID, and they're going to try to, do a stopgap on the economy collapsing and all these things I've talked about. And it'll last for a couple of years, and then that's going to hit everybody. The hyperinflation, it's going to hit people before then, but it's going to hit everybody in, 2, 3, 4 years. And it's just, and once it does, it's going to be, all downhill from there. No matter what they try. I mean, the value of the dollar is going to plummet. It's going to set off like worldwide crises and food crises and all these things. This thing is only delaying it. And this is the wrong guy, because when you listen to him, like, how can you really have faith in this guy? He's just lost and clueless.
As we bring home key parts of my American Jobs Plan, I'm going to make the case, and I've told this to the negotiators. I'm going to continue to make the case. Their critical investments are still needed, including those in my family plan, American Family Plan. Maybe the most important among them is extending.
He's struggling so hard to read. Like, look at him. Like, he can't see very well. And
The child tax credit, which will significantly benefit middle class and working folks. Let me explain what that is.
What is it?
Pretty soon,
I covered this before, but I'm going to do it again because it's hilarious.
Taxpayers in America are going to get a significant check back from the IRS. For example, if you have to pay taxes and you have a good income, you get to deduct $2,000 per dependent, per child. And that comes off the bottom line of your taxes, and you probably still owe more after that's cut off. But for families who in fact don't have that big a tax bill, they don't get anything from this. So we changed the law this year, and it's cutting child poverty by 40%. And here in Wisconsin, by July 15th, they're going to start they're going to be picking up the phone and calling you and say, thanks, God. They're going to get checks from the IRS. Here's what they did.
They're going to get checks even though they're not paying taxes. So this is, again, where you have so much money going out. They're printing so much cash for these bailouts, right? And the infrastructure bill, and what Trump did also, it's going to come to $8 to $10 trillion. But there's only $3 trillion that it comes in, $3.5 trillion in tax revenues. And that, so that means, so whatever the bailout money is, whatever it comes out to be, if it's $8 trillion, $10 trillion, that's all going to be debt. But then they're just going to hand out some cash to impoverished people because, COVID. And so, that's another thing, right? And then, where's where's the money coming from? How are you going to pay for this?
For every child you have under the age of 6, you're going to get $3,600. And for every child under the age over the age of 12, you're going to
again. He's supposed to be reading, and he's falling apart here.
Get $3,000. So you'll actually get a cash payment instead of just a credit against your taxes, because you don't pay that many taxes if you're making the minimum wage, or you're making $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year. And people say, well, that's a giveaway. Hey guys, I think it's time to give ordinary people a tax break.
But dude, these are people who aren't paying taxes. You're not giving them a tax break. You're giving money to people who aren't able to pay taxes because of poverty. And so it is a giveaway. But this is them again whispering.
The wealthy are doing fine. I mean it. I mean it.
He means it. He was lying about all the other stuff, but he means this part.
Why is this not a tax break for working folks when the stuff we give to the super wealthy are called tax breaks? Look, major action on clean energy, housing, caregiving, on child and paid leave, universal pre-K, free community college. The human infrastructure is intertwined with our physical infrastructure. It's going to.
So this is the national debt clock. Let's start here. U.S. national debt. Let's wait till it goes around to zero. Let's count to see how long it takes to get to $1 million. So it's usually around, it's less than a minute. And now it's even faster because of the bailout stuff. And so you get a sense of how long it takes. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, and there it is. So it took 21 seconds. Let's say my counting was off by a couple of seconds either way. It takes about 20 seconds for us to get another $1 million in debt. And so that's $28 trillion of debt. Here's the U.S. and federal tax revenue. And that right now is sitting at $3.5 trillion a year. So that's the income. And so the budget here, right here, this is the largest budget items. Medicaid is sitting at $1.3 trillion, Social Security at $1.1 trillion, and defense war budget at $728 billion. And that ends up being the most expensive budget item at $1.7 trillion at the end of the year. This is already wiped out by this, right? Like this thing is wiped out by these three budget items. You understand this? And that doesn't cover all the other governmental expenses, federal government money, things that go to schools, states, natural disasters, all the other stuff. And so this is why we're in debt, because these things alone cost more than the income that we're bringing in. And then there's stuff like the almost $600 trillion of derivatives market, the total U.S. debt of $85 trillion, and then these non-funded, these things aren't, haven't made it into the budget, Medicaid, Social Security, these are over long periods of time. These aren't for the year. Up here, this is for the year. This is for, the promise to pay forever. And that all these unfunded liabilities equal about $150 trillion. And so what you're doing by taking out another $10 trillion, adding that to this in these, bailouts, and that's going straight to debt. There's no money to cover what JoJo wants to do. And we do need new infrastructure. We just don't have the money to pay for it. We don't have it. We're broke. We're assed out, right? And right now we're able to print money because we're the world's reserve currency without as much inflation as other countries, but that's coming to an end. So there's going to be overwhelming poverty coming to America. And right now their plan is to absorb the middle class, get rid of the middle class, and have, ultra wealthy and then everybody else in poverty. So maybe the most telling part came when he went on like a couple-minute rant about how we need to replace all our diesel buses with electric buses because of the toxic diesel pollution.
Every day, more than 25 million kids and thousands of bus drivers breathe polluted air on the way to and from school. Diesel air pollution is linked to asthma and other health problems. It hurts communities. It causes students to get sick and miss time in school. We owe it to our kids to clean up the school buses, and this deal will help do just that.
You guys might remember this was Joe Biden's No Malarkey tour bus that was polluting up the atmosphere and harming kids in the community with its toxic pollution. But what's really telling about this is Joe Biden has been a public official, a congressman for 47 years. He's been in Washington, D.C. with a lot of power with his, no malarkey way of going about things. And he could have changed all of it. If there's one thing that Trump said that was accurate in the debates about JoJo, was that Magoo has been around for so many years and he didn't do anything, right? I mean, he claims to have done stuff, but if the country's as bad as Magoo says it is, and he was in power in Washington, D.C. and a variety of different places, either in Congress or being a vice president, and Trump was only there for 4 years, and they can say that Trump did all these things, but we know the economy, and it was a false economy. Like, I don't agree with what Trump did, but he deregulated everything, and the banks and when Wall Street could go back and do their derivatives BS and all those things that caused the economic collapse in 2008. And I think there was another collapse in 2019. But as far as we all can tell, the official story, everything was going well in the economy and on every other plane of existence for Trump. And every, all of the Trump stuff in terms of the jobs, he had records in terms of job creation, and the economy appeared to be doing really well, even though we were still in debt and even though, it was a false economy. And so everything happened to Trump after COVID. And you can't, you're lying if you pretend that COVID and the shutdowns and the way that the media and everybody portrayed it was, had nothing to do with COVID and a sort of a manipulation by the mainstream media and everybody else, right? And so JoJo is basically saying in 4 years Trump wrecked the country, and that it was doing well when he and Obama ran it, and it was doing well when he was a senator for so many years. And we all know that's not true, right? We all know that a lot of the things that he claims are going wrong here. I mean, there's been diesel buses on the road, and he says diesel fuel is toxic. It's hurting the bus drivers and kids and polluting making the environment more toxic. And that all happened on his watch. The whole bus, I mean, back when he was a kid, I guess probably there was maybe some sort of buses, but all the buses and the way that busing has gone in terms of, widespread diesel busing and the busing of kids into schools has been something that's happened while he was in Washington, D.C. And now he wants to clean up that problem that he could have, been working on for 47 years. And this is, all of JoJo's rhetoric is that he says things that, he should have done something about before. Like, he makes it sound like he's the guy who's making America great again, but he was a career-long politician. So he was in charge of wrecking it and all the things that JoJo do. So going back to the national debt clock, and my wife and I were talking about this. We went to pick up some pizza together, and I was telling her about the debt clock now is another $1 million of debt every 20 seconds. And she said, yeah, that's $3 million a minute, which I should have, thought myself. But every minute we are in debt by $3 million more dollars, right? $3 million a minute of debt, right? Like crazy. See, when a company faces any institution, a family, a company, an individual person faces unbelievable financial ruin, overwhelming, soul-crushing debt that you could never pay off. Something is developed technologically that your company makes, or you're a person who's obsolete, your job no longer exists because it's done by AI, and you don't know how to do anything else. or you lose a war, or you lose whatever. I mean, some catastrophic thing happens to your company, your country, your family, you as an individual, and you have to make wholesale changes to your lifestyle. And that's what's happening globally. The global economy has collapsed, and there's just too much debt. And then there's, there's legitimate problems with pollution, with overpopulation, with energy. I mean, all these things are happening. A lack of resources. Too much of the world's resources have been devoured by this generation, these generations. And I said this before, time and time again, nobody can stop this. This is how a debt-based system ends. I saw some old YouTube video when I was first learning about the economy and how it works and the usury system. It might have been the money as debt videos, could be something else. But they had listed all these famous people from maybe even hundreds of years ago that don't ever have a usury system economy. Like in your town or in your state or, country, whatever it is, globally. People from, ancient civilizations, older civilizations. Because usury economies that are based in debt-based economies, they're Ponzi schemes. They are something that creates a lot of wealth quickly because it's imaginary. And I've explained this time and time again in various videos, but they collapse in the way our world economy is collapsing because they're not real. They're not based in divine principles and laws. And you have all these Trumpers with their hopium that feel like, that Trump could have solved it or he's going to solve it because they don't want to look at the real problem as a systemic problem. And this goes from the lefties and the righties and everybody that thinks that this system can be fixed and made into something good and wholesome and real, and it can't because it's based in debt. One of my Instagram friends sent me a video, and, they didn't explain what the video is about or why I might want to watch it, And usually I wouldn't watch something like that because there's no context to it. And especially it said something about the truth about Trump, and I figured it was some right-wing person who was a Trump fan, and they were going to tell me how, Trump is going to be president in a couple months or a year or whatever it is. There's all these theories floating around. And I would say 80 to 90% of the time I just wouldn't watch the video. People send me stuff all the time that I don't, especially if there's no context and I don't know. I need some explanation of why I would watch it and use it. But anyway, is this woman, and she was being banned from Instagram, and I think she had a big right-wing following, and she had been a very ardent Trump supporter, but then she said that she had a, realization that Trump basically screwed him, and he, she listed all the things that I've been talking about for years here. So I guess somebody was sending me this because it validates a lot of things I've been saying about Trump and all the things that he did that hurt the cause or hurt their cause or whatever it is. And she was coming to the realization there was no avenue for people on the right wing. And there's no avenue for truthers because the people who run the power, like there's local people, there's local right-wing people that run towns and run even states, cities, and some states where there's conservative power, there's still some Christian power in local communities and right-wing power, and there's not really any truther power. And there's a lot of money that people, have a lot of millionaires and, people that have some extra money, have, some local wealth. But the big power players, the billionaires and the trillionaires, all the major networks, including Fox News, which is, completely showed itself as being a shill organization. I mean, it always was, but for right-wingers, when they bailed on Trump during the election, and Trump himself, and all these other really rich people, and they are all on the side of this progressive movement because they all know that the system's going to collapse. They, there's no more right wing or left wing. There's no more, pretend politics. They know America's going down. They know the world economy is going to change drastically. And they are doing their best to preserve their wealth and power, to get hard assets. I've talked about this before. And this is what all these things are about. And Americans are at each other's throats, falling for these, all this stuff that's being put out there, the fake woke crowd and the lefties and the righties and the Democrats and the Republicans. And now it's just about wealth, real wealth, and the people who run the system preserving everything that they can preserve to keep their lifestyle and their power going, even though they're doomed to failure because it's an end of a yuga and their time is up. Their time to run the show or whatever it is down here is coming to an end. And each person has to figure out, because it's going to be different based in where you live, what country you live, what state you live in. It's going to be different for everybody in terms of what they need to move forward as things change. Each person's, you have to have your own sort of treatment plan, and maybe a family treatment plan and a community treatment plan on how you're going to endure this shift, the end of our life the way we know it and whatever's coming next, and forming a deep internal relationship with God. I talk about that at almost every video because that's the most essential thing to moving forward. It's always, even if the system wasn't collapsing, it's still better to have an internalized relationship with God. It's something every person needs to evolve and to get on their soul's path, because our soul has a purpose. God has a purpose for all of us, but most people are so far away from that purpose, are so divided from their spiritual self. There's a schism there between themselves, and another way, this is the year of the schism. And you have to, recultivate that relationship with God internally and your soul and figure out why you're here and get back to the business of your true purpose and your true, pristine essence. That's why I always talk about the heartfulness meditation as a system that helps people can reconnect with the divinity within. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely reporting from the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.